Hi, my name is Marcus Key, and it's my pleasure to introduce you and welcome you to the 22nd Noel Potter Lecture. Before getting started with the main event, it's important to recognize that Dickinson College is located on the unceded lands of the Susquehanna Nation. We acknowledge the many indigenous people that lived on these lands, as well as thousands of Western indigenous children forced into the Carlisle Indian School in 1879 as part of a federal cultural eradication effort. The Potter Lecture, why we're here tonight, was established by alumni, colleagues, and friends in 2004 to honor Emeritus Professor Potter, who retired in 2005 from Dickinson. George Lee, from the class of 1971, led the charge to raise a generous endowment from fellow alumni to fund this annual lecture in honor of Noel's 36 years of service of the college. And George is with us tonight. Good to see you, George. During this time, Noel taught, this is a quote, 3,178 students in physical geology, and the majority of them passed, and 233 majors in field and structural geology. Noel, could you please stand? But now it's my pleasure to introduce our 22nd Potter Lecturer, Dr. Kirk Johnson. Dr. Johnson is the Sant Director of the Smithsonian's National Museum of Natural History, where he oversees the world's largest natural history collection. The museum hosts about 4 million visitors each year, maybe a little bit fewer this year. Its scientists annually publish hundreds of scientific research papers and name hundreds of new species. The exhibits on the evolution of life, especially the dinosaurs, are world famous. Is it true that you're replacing the dinosaur hall with the bryozoan hall starting next year? I've been hearing those. It's all set. Excellent. Due to his popular arrival at the Smithsonian in 2012, Johnson was previously a paleontologist at the Denver Museum of Nature and Science, and he works on fossil plants and the extinction of the dinosaurs. In 2011, he led an Ice Age excavation near Snowmass Village in Colorado that recovered parts of more than 50 mastodon skeletons. He is known for his scientific articles, popular books, museum exhibitions, documentaries, and collaborations with artists. Johnson's recent documentaries include the 3-part NOVA series, Making North America, The Great Yellowstone Thaw, which aired on PBS, and his latest documentary is about the ancient climate of the Arctic and Antarctic as NOVA episode Polar Extremes. His latest book, Cruising the Fossil Coastline, travels of an artist and a scientist along the shores of the prehistoric Pacific, explores the deep history of the West Coast from California to Alaska. His latest film, entitled Walrus, Life on Thin Ice, premiered last week on PBS. Kirk is originally from Bellevue, Washington, just east of Jimi Hendrix's hometown, Seattle. He has a bachelor's degree in geology from Amherst College, a master's degree in geology and paleobotany from the University of Pennsylvania, and a doctorate in geology and paleobotany from Yale University, where I had the pleasure of overlapping with him there. Dickinson has a long connection with the Smithsonian. Dickinson College professor and 1840 alumnus Spencer Fullerton Baird was one of the driving forces behind the establishment of the Smithsonian Institution. George, you didn't overlap with Professor Baird. No, that was before your time. He was appointed the first assistant secretary in 1850 and was instrumental in creating the U.S. National Museum. When he moved from Carlisle to Washington, D.C., it reportedly took 2 freight cars to transport his collection of birds, lizards, fish, skins, skeletons, and fossils weighing 89,000 pounds. Many of these specimens can still be found in the Smithsonian museums. Right now, Kirk is going to tell us about museum, science, nature, and the future. So let's welcome Dr. Johnson.
Thanks, Marcus. It's great to see you after a long time. So I really have one goal tonight, which is to change the way you think about natural history museums. I've been the director for 13 years at this one. I worked at Denver Museum for 22 years, and I think natural history museums are one of the great tools of the future, and I hope to convince you of that tonight. I recently did a repatriation to Hawaii. 29 Hawaiians arrived at the museum, and they told me that I had to sing in Hawaiian my genealogy going back 3 generations as part of the ceremony. So I kind of respected that. I think that sort of telling your genealogy sort of says where you are and where you're from. And I want to start with this guy. This is Bert Pierce, born in 1879, the same year the Carlisle School started, a long time ago. Picture was taken when he was 17 years old. He grew up near the plains, Salisbury Plains, near Stonehenge, was a sheep herder. Answered an ad on the wall of the pub offering hunting for sheep herders in Wyoming. So he moved to Wyoming in 1896 and became a cowboy and then a rancher. And then he sold the ranch in 48. And here's the same guy in 1961. When he was 82 years old. So he's a guy that really saw that whole arc. And the little dude laughing in his lap is me. So, you know, I would say like there's several pieces to this thing now. This is a guy that was born in the Salisbury Plain or Stonehenge, not far from Lyme Regis, home of the great fossil hunter Mary Anning. His ranch in Wyoming is full of incredible fossils. My mom grew up on that ranch. I grew up going to the ranch. But more than anything else, you think of 1879 as being a really long time ago, but that was my grandfather, and that's me. So it's like people last a long time, and as a geologist and a paleontologist, I'm really stunned at these 2 time frames that are colliding. One is the time of geologic time, and the other one is the time of how long we as humans actually last, and how much we've actually seen in our lives. And humans are really good at shifting the baseline, like normal is what it is today. But normal's moving really quick right now, and really it's a conversation. And this diagram, sorry, I jumped ahead, is my friend Ron Milo at the University of Tel Aviv created this document which shows the biomass of mammals. These are just mammals. So on the top, you see the time, 1860, so more or less the age of Bert Pierce and now. On the top are the weight of humans in the yellow, the weight of our animal, like our cows and our pigs and our sheep in red. And down below are, in green, all the wild land animals, and in blue are all the wild marine mammals, the whales. And what you see is that when Bert was born, there was about the same. There were about 200 megatons of human animals and people, and about 200 megatons of marine mammals and marine land mammals. And you can see how that's changed over the last time frame, over the span of Bert's life and my life. So we live in this really amazing time where the world is changing profoundly, and yet we all kind of think we're in normal times. And you can see how much things have changed. So it brings me to the Smithsonian, founded in 1846. It opened in 1855, and it was built for the increase and diffusion of knowledge. A place, you know, like I always say the Smithsonian were our nation's first bet on science. And in fact, the first secretary of the Smithsonian was a scientist, John Henry. He didn't want the place to be a museum. He wanted to be a place of scientific knowledge and study. And he built the first weather system for the US. They were looking at how to create flight. There's a number of things that Smithsonian is doing. And then that dude from Dickinson showed up, Spencer Fullerton Baird, and made the Smithsonian into a museum. He literally showed up with a museum on 2 train cars. And the Smithsonian, by 1855, when Baird was then the secretary, was a museum and moving forward. In 1883, the Smithsonian hired this guy named William Temple Hornaday, who was a taxidermist. And this is a time when the bison were being pretty much exterminated in the American West. In 1886, the Smithsonian dispatched Hornaday out to Montana to get a few of the last bison. And he brought them back and installed them in the museum. There's a group of 6 bison as an exhibit about things that were going extinct. And as you know, this is the same time we're concerned about all sorts of things going extinct because the concept of extinction itself had suddenly appeared. The idea that things could go away on the planet. So there was a growing awareness in the late 1800s about the importance of change on the planet caused by humans. That's why these natural museums were built in the first place, was to help people understand that stuff was going away. Go to Washington today, here's the Smithsonian. It's 20 museums on the National Mall. Our nation wraps itself in museums. It's an amazing thing for a nation to say. There are, when they call a gathering of Smithsonian directors, 60 people show up, because there are the 20 museums plus research centers and all sorts of different things, the National Zoo. And here is the National Museum of Natural History, which I have the honor to be the director of for the last 13 years. This building opened in 1910. My mom visited it in 1939 when she was 10 years old. And I have a postcard she wrote to her brother back in Wyoming on the ranch about how cool this museum was. So again, the point I'm trying to make here is things seem like they happened a really long time ago, and kind of they did, but kind of they didn't. Like from 1879 till now, things have been racing along, and a lot's going on. 2019, we opened the Hall of Deep Time. It's the story of the history of life on Earth, beginning at the beginning of the planet, up to the present. And then we realized that all fossil halls in the world end in the past. The story ends sometime in the Ice Age. You know, you go from the Cambrian to the Ice Age and you're done. We're like, no, we got to end this one in the future, because humans are part of the story of life on Earth, and the story is still playing itself out. Besides, if you make an exhibit that ends in the Ice Age or the present, the day you open it, all your graphs are out of date. So if you go and look at our graphs, they'll end to the future, because we acknowledge the fact that we are part of the planet, we are of the planet, humans and nature, but we're busily doing something that's never happened before on planet Earth. We're sort of appropriating the planet for our own use. The exhibit has got this amazing national T-Rex that we brought from Montana. And if you come to the museum, we use a lot of iconic objects just to catch your eye, because with 4 million visitors a year, which means on a typical weekend day we'll see 35,000 people in the museum, most people don't stay for very long. So basically I have the chance, maybe a 45-minute chance, to catch someone's attention and startle them into realization there's something cool going on with planet Earth. So I spent a lot of time obtaining and creating icons. We have things like this Fenkovi. It's the world's largest elephant. This is a 22,000-pound elephant that was shot in Angola in 1955. I never found a bigger elephant. However, National Geographic now has gotten into Angola after the 40-plus years civil war in Angola. And there's a new film out by Werner Herzog called The Ghost Elephant, and it looks like they have relocated this tribe of elephants. And there's some really big elephants out there. So the idea that the big elephants haven't gone extinct yet. Or here's the rhinoceros shot by Teddy Roosevelt in 1910, after he was president. We only had 2 presidents that are naturalists, Thomas Jefferson and Teddy Roosevelt. We definitely need another president who is a paleontologist or biologist or something along those lines, because it's time to think about the planet and not just politics. I'm always, thanks, John. I'm always looking for things that are jaw droppers, and we had in the museum an incredible jaw of a megalodon, the big shark, just the teeth and the jaw that we put it on display in 1965. I kept walking by that thing going, I wonder how big this megalodon was. And one day, I was thinking, God, I wonder if I could make a megalodon. So I called the paleontologist and said, do you know enough about megalodon to make one? And they're like, sure. And I called the sculptor. I said, could you make me a megalodon? He said, sure. So we made a megalodon. And you should come see it, because it's 52 feet long. It's 14 feet from the base of the belly to the base of the fin. It is the most incredibly huge thing. It came into the building in 21 pieces. We bolted it together, finished it, painted it, hoisted it up into place. Here's an 8,000-pound block of quartz crystals from Arkansas. Jaw droppers, things that people see once and it sticks with them. Of course, the Hope Diamond. And as Marcus said, we have paleontologists and biologists and earth scientists and space scientists and anthropologists and archaeologists, a team of about 100 scientists in the museum that are all over the world. They're collecting fossils, they're collecting plants and animals, they're collecting meteorites, they're studying those things in our labs. This is the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument in Utah, which over the last 2 decades has produced something like 15 new species of dinosaurs. In fact, the number of known dinosaurs on the planet has tripled since 1995. We live in this amazing planet of ongoing discovery. Since I became director, we've described more than 6,000 new species in the building. Here's one of our scientists in the middle of the night, in the middle of the rainforest, hunting for frogs. Here's one setting up a long-term monitoring station on tropical reefs. Here's a microsub we use in Curacao to go down about 1,000 meters and sample the deep, dark reefs. And if you look at the coverage of what this museum has collected in its 169 years of existence, you have this incredible global sample. Now, this is a map that I generated using all of our collections that are digitized. We have in the collection 148 million objects. This map is based on only about 10 million of those objects. This is 1/14 of our sample size. And you can see that we basically have sampled planet Earth. So I like to say that the museum is an analog twin of the natural world. We're creating an analog twin of the planet. All the minerals, all the fossils, all the animals, all the plants, all the birds are in the museum. And if you think about that, museums become really unique, incredible places because that's where we hold everything in the planet. Now we're in the process of trying to make a digital twin of the analog twin of the planet. We have all sorts of cool, weird collections, like the National Mosquito Collection, for instance. You might think, why? One of our scientists just finished a monograph called The Mosquitoes of the World. Giant 2-volume set. There are 3,700 species of mosquitoes. All of them, except for one, are blood-feeding disease carriers, cause of most of the death on the planet, mosquitoes. And we've been actively doing the genomics of all those mosquitoes because human health depends on somebody paying attention to mosquitoes. We have dried collections. I always like this little alligator that jumped out of his skin. We have pickled collections. We store things in alcohol. We call these things pickles, by the way. We have 19.2 miles of pickled object shelving. Just think about that for a second. Here's a pickled giant squid. Here's a pickled gorilla. So things you would never have conceived of are in the collections. Why would you keep something pickled? Because you preserve the internal anatomy, you preserve the parasites, you preserve the genetics. You have ways of interrogating these specimens into the future for any number of different reasons. We also keep frozen tissues in giant liquid nitrogen dewars and ultra-cold freezers. We call these popsicles. The popsicles are good because frozen tissue is the best genome-grade tissue for doing genetics. So we're very much involved in the actual genomics of biodiversity. There's so much amazing discovery in 2004 was the creation of the human genome. Everything else on the planet, all 2 million known species and all the 10 or 50 more species out there, each have their own genome. They're going to be the source of all future medicines and foods and everything else we do as humans to survive on a changing planet. And where would you go if you wanted to actually have one of those samples? You got to go to a natural history museum. So it's not just the exhibits or the visitors, it's these incredible collections. And the collections are staffed by curators and science staff. Here's the paleontology collection. Here's the National Herbarium. Here's the shell collection. Here's the butterfly collection. Here's the bird collection. Here's the mammal collection. And of course, some animals are big and we're always collecting. So here's a gray whale that came ashore in Whidbey Island in Washington State, which is now in the whale collection. A room in Washington, D.C., which is the only place in the world you can see skeletons of all the 100 cetaceans species. It's utterly amazing. I always say that being in the behind the scenes of this museum is like as close to infinity as you're ever going to get. It's a remarkable experience, the mineral collection. Again, there are 5,000 kinds of minerals because it used to be that we thought animal, mineral, vegetable, and they're like, wait a minute, living things make minerals too. You've got bones in your body, and our planet has a whole bunch of extra minerals because it's had a whole bunch of life for the last 3.5 billion years. Incredible minerals, thin sections, and we even collect all the volcanoes in the world. The Global Volcanism Project monitors all 1,500 active volcanoes on the planet and publishes a regular accounting of what's happening anywhere in the world. And the key thing here is that if you look at those little signals, the ones that are red are where you have volcanoes that are located next to population centers. Because volcanoes are dangerous. They blow up and kill a lot of people. So our monitoring is a global hazard awareness project for the planet. I've been thinking for a long time, you can imagine I've been bathing myself in this knowledge for the last 13 years. I didn't know a lot of it when I came here. I'm constantly amazed by the things that the Smithsonian has and how little that people know what we have. And I'm always like, how can I help people understand what we have and why it matters? And it occurred to me that I should try to explore different ways of visualizing biodiversity. I mean, it turns out that a lot of people don't even know what the word biodiversity means. It's just nature. It's just all the living stuff of the entire planet, the millions and millions of species. But when was the last time you perused a million species of anything? It's a hard concept for people to think of that, because they walk down the street. Most people can't even name a tree. They're like, what tree is that? I don't know what tree that is. Maybe it's a pine tree. I don't know. But if you go to the tropical rainforests, in 1 hectare of forest, there might be 600 trees representing 400 species of trees. There's like 100,000 species of trees in the world. So this thing means that you have to start thinking about how do we represent and show things. And so I've been experimenting with this. I did a public lecture in San Diego to the group called Esri, which is the GIS people. They do all the electronic maps. And they have this users group that's attended by 20,000 people. So I got to speak in front of 20,000 people about biodiversity. And they let me play with their graphics team, which is awesome, because I was able to start taking groups of things and then multiplying them. They gave me 10 jumbotrons and a 100-foot-long LED screen to project biodiversity on, which maybe was like the best 45 minutes of my life, was just blasting this room full of 20,000 people with biodiversity in all its forms. And it occurred to me, like, we use lots of different techniques to study organisms, and they're beautiful in their own right. These are cleared leaves. We take a leaf, we bleach out the chlorophyll, then put a red dye in it so you can actually see the vein pattern, and there's 360,000 species of plants that have leaves. So let's start showing all of those, or of course things like butterflies or caterpillars. But we're also doing this incredible work out in the ocean where we're imaging organisms alive, and here are just midwater organisms from about 1,000 feet down off the Monterey Channel, or all the different shrimps and crayfish in the world. This one I like. These are the face portraits of ants. And they're like criminals, right? And these horrible thug-like mugshots of ants. Or fish studied by bleaching them out and dyeing their tissues. So you have these really beautiful things. Or fish studied by x-raying the fish. Here's a really cool one. These are larval fishes. It turns out that a lot of fish, the little larval fish, look nothing like the adult fish. We didn't know that until we started doing the genetics of fish. We're like, oh, that's not a new species. That's just a baby tuna or a baby swordfish. And look at these crazy larval fish, or all the reptiles, or all the birds. And on it goes. It's like this remarkable thing. And I'm just getting started now because I suddenly realized that I can tap infinity and I can image infinity. And I'm somehow going to blast the world with this. I don't know. You're just a test case. I'm testing you guys out. It's a room of 95 people. But it's just like this information needs to start going somewhere. And we've started the process of making the digital twin of Earth's analog twin. We've been scanning things. We scanned the entire National Herbarium, 5 million sheets. Took us 3 years, 8,000 sheets a day for 3 years. To get 5 million things scanned. We're now scanning all the pollinators. So this incredible automated pollinator scanning thing. And here's a 3 millimeter long bee. It's just come through this scanning thing. And we're scanning about 1,500 insects a day right now with this crazy contraption. We recently scanned Henry, the giant elephant, in super high resolution, millimeter scale resolution. So when you start doing stuff like that, you start thinking about, okay, you got a fish in a jar. Who cares? Well, that fish in a jar came from somewhere, and it's surrounded by a sort of a cloud of information. So there's sort of the cataloging information, where it was collected, who collected it, when they collected it. But then studies are done by it. You can actually see reports that are done. Maybe it's linked to some other databases. Maybe you take the genetics of that thing and run the code and put that in GenBank. And pretty soon you realize that every object in the collection has an information layer that makes that object a bearer and holder of long-term knowledge. And there are these great big international databases now like GBIF, the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, that scrapes our data and aggregates it with the data from all the other museums in the world. And we can pull our data back out of that. And we're sort of building what I would call the World Museum. All the natural history museums in the whole world together represent what humans know about the planet and everything that lives on it. No other place has that stuff. Without museums, this stuff would not exist. And most people don't even think about museums other than being buildings full of exhibits. There's so much more than that. A really cool thing is that if you take a sample of seawater and filter it out, it's full of dispersed DNA of all the organisms that were swimming in that water. A typical sample taken out of the Atlantic Ocean will give you between 700 and 1,000 different species in a glass of water the size that you would drink from. So instead of actually going out and swimming around and trying to count fish, take a glass of water, sequence it, and you have an instant assay of what's there. You can do it in a stream or a lake or a pond. The problem is that we haven't got the genetic sequences yet. So now we're in the business of sequencing all the fish in the collection. So we can actually turn these environmental DNA samples into sensing tools for where things live. We've got two experiments going on. One is all of the fish that live in the coastal waters of the United States. That's in the 200-mile strip around the coast of the United States, the East Coast, the Caribbean coast, well, the Gulf of Mexico coast, and the Pacific coast. And if you add also around the Pacific territories, there are something like 5,000 species of fish that live out there. 87% of those 5,000 fish are in jars in our museum, just our museum. We don't even have to go get the fish. They're just right there. You pull them off the shelf, sequence them, and you relate to it. We're also doing a test sample here in Florida, looking at the Indian River Lagoon down by Palm Beach, which is an interesting lagoon, which is sort of the intertwining of the tropical and temperate zones. And we're looking at all of the organisms that live in the sediment, in the mud, and sequencing all of those organisms. Those are two tests we're doing. I mentioned earlier that Hornaday went out in 1886 and brought back some bison. He brought back parts of 22 bison he collected in 1886. On December 7th, 1886, when my grandfather was 7 years old, he shot the last known big bison in Montana. Brought him back. He built a diorama, which went on display at the Smithsonian in 1888. This is the first time most people on the East Coast had actually even seen a bison. And they're like, these things are going extinct. The bison was famous. That one is there. He became the face of the $10 bill in 1901. He's the bison on the symbol of the Department of Interior. And that bison, I had this really harsh awakening. Summer before last, I was watching Ken Burns' new TV show about the bison. And he tells the story of Hornaday and the bison. And I was like, oh, that's so great. I'm going to go find out. Somewhere in my catacombs are those 6 bison. And I went down to the mammal department. They said, yeah, sorry, boss. We gave those away. And I'm like, you gave away the 6 iconic bison, the last bison? Yeah, in 1957. We gave them to somewhere in Montana. So I started Googling around. And I found that they had ended up in a little town called Fort Benton, Montana, a town of 1,400 people. And I drove out there, and there they are, those 6 bison. It's a longer story. I can talk bison all night long, but it's like, there they are. And think about that bison, this last bison on the plains. It's got its data cloud. There's Hornaday, the collection records. There's all the information about his taxidermy. He went on to write a book called The Extermination of the American Bison. He went on with Teddy Roosevelt to found the American Bison Society. He went on to found the beginning of conservation for American bison. And he made this incredible map which showed the range of bison in the 1840s. That's the blue range. By the 1870s, they'd gotten down to here. By 1880, they were there. And by 1886, they were pretty much gone. But it was from that near extinction miss that bison conservation started. And now we have about 500,000 bison out there. Here's like a map of all of the things that happened with that one specimen to the present, the knowledge around that single specimen. And here's a map of bison today. Now, bison are still fundamentally extinct from an ecological point of view. They're mainly on bison ranches. They're more like treated as a different form of cattle. So they're not really, the plains have not gone back to being a bison ecosystem, but you can imagine that parts of it are. And there are certain areas now where they're trying to reintroduce bison, particularly on Indian reservations, to make them once again part of the ecosystems of the American West. And this is a bison ranch I visited in South Dakota, and it's like, oh, this is what it used to be like back in the day. Now I'm going to pivot to earth sciences for just a second. The amazing shot taken by Bill Anders, Christmas Eve, 1968, the first view of planet Earth. They call this the blue marble shot. Bill Anders was a supporter of the Smithsonian. I was at his house 3 months before he passed away a couple of years ago. Amazing to touch somebody like that who took this image of our planet and showed what a precious planet we have. Here's the asteroid Bennu that our guys at the Smithsonian were the first people to analyze, and they found evidence for amino acids and salty brines and evidence that life may have been present somewhere in our solar system even before it was present on Earth. It's an interesting result. Here's the oldest piece of the Earth. This is about it's a zircon crystal that's about 4.3 billion years old. So we're still interrogating the planet, and as a geologist, I'm always amazed that people aren't geologists, frankly, because geology is so cool. I mean, the fact that there's an underpinning to our planet, here are the Precambrian to Cambrian rocks, here are the Paleozoic rocks, here are the Mesozoic rocks, here are the Cenozoic rocks, and this incredible book of time that exists everywhere. The story of our planet's written in the stony tablets of this planet all across the planet, and it's still people are like, what, it's a fossil? Are you talking about a dinosaur? It's like, come on, folks, dial it up. Let's get going. Fossilized dinoflagellates, fossilized plankton, fossilized plants, my particular specialty, fossilized dinosaurs, fossilized mammals, all playing out on this evolving planet where the continents are moving and the climate is changing. And it was amazing when we were building our deep time exhibit that we actually kind of realized that, no one's ever done a climate curve for the entire Phanerozoic, the last 500 million years. So we assembled a team of the world's best paleoclimate experts and built that curve, which is kind of cool. It's a curve that shows the arc of climate on the planet. You can look over to the right where we are now. The mean annual temperature on the planet today is 15 degrees centigrade. We're concerned from a global warming point of view about 2 degrees warming, but notice that at times it's been up to 30 plus. So that's 15 degrees warming. So we see the range of how the Earth can be, the cools and cools, what happens on the Earth depending on where the continents are, what the currents are doing, et cetera. And it takes us to places like Greenland. One of the most amazing places I've been is on top of the ice sheet in Greenland, just most terrifying place by far, just fallen cities of ice blocks that go on forever. And the fact that even here in Pennsylvania, the evidence of older ice times is right out the front door. The glacial deposits of Pennsylvania give you this incredible document. Today is what we have now is we have an icy Arctic, but 280,000 years ago, that ice sheet was down here, and then it went away, and it came back again, and it went away again, and it came back again, and now we have now. So what that kind of makes me wonder is like, that's a long time ago. Does that really matter to people? But if you look at the thing called the Keeling curve, which is the record of carbon dioxide in the Earth's atmosphere, and carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. This is a curve that this guy Charles Keeling started collecting in 1957. He used the top of Mauna Loa in Hawaii because that's like a dipstick in the middle of the Pacific Ocean where you can get nice, fresh atmosphere. It's not being contaminated by anything. And he started measuring on a continuing basis CO2 concentration in the atmosphere. And when he started, it was around 315 parts per million. Last month, it hit 430 parts per million. Steady climb. Now, I love this curve because that is my life. My parents met in 1957. I was born in 1960, and I'm standing in front of you in 2025. So there's been a 36% increase in the Earth's atmosphere of carbon dioxide in the time it's taken to grow me. And that makes me think of Bert Pierce, who was born in 1879, and all the things that have happened since he was born. But if you put this in a longer time scale, here's what it looks like against the 10,000 years of human civilization. 10,000 years, you can see how dramatic that increase in CO2 is. Or if you put it against the ice ages, you can see the coming and going of those ice sheets. You can see how dramatic it still is. So all this has kind of made me think about this whole concept that we have our own personal time shadow. And I talk to people about what they really care about. And what they care about really is their family, their siblings, their parents, their kids, their grandparents, their grandkids. Beyond that, not much. Most people don't really care that much about their great-grandparents or their great-grandkids. But that whole range, those 5 generations, grandparents, parents, you, children, grandchildren, it's like that's really your time shadow. It's really like your time shadow is what you care about. You care about the future of your kids and your grandkids. As you get older, you get more interested in your grandparents. Like, I wish I could have talked to my grandfather who was alive the same year they opened the Carlisle School. I mean, it seems like a long time ago, but I knew that dude. I could have asked him a question then. Not that I could ask a question when I was 1 year old, but you get the point. And here he is, looking pretty dapper in 1905. So he lived in the 1800s. This is my mom, who grew up on the ranch, born in 1929. She lived in the 1900s. Here's me and my sister, 2000s. And these are my sister's kids. They were born in 2012. So those kids are going to live to see the 22nd century. They'll live past the year 2100. Their kids will probably live to 2150 or something like that. So my time shadow goes from 1879 to 2150, which kind of leads me to this little thing. It's like, we live in these completely anomalous times. The rate of change in our time is staggering. You look at this crazy curve. This is world population from 20,000 years ago to the present. And you watch the curve jump to 8 billion, up from 1.9 billion when my grandfather was born. And you see how fast the world is changing. So all of this kind of jars me into this world of like, part of me is a paleontologist comfortable with millions of years. Part of me is comfortable with what's happening next month. And part of me is thinking, what's going to happen in the next 10, 60, 80 years? It makes me really think about the interventions we can do now to change the world in a positive way. And look, I'm a museum guy. So, you use the tools you have. My tool is a museum. And I thought, how would we go about making museums more impactful? And the first thing is that all the museums are more powerful than one museum. I happen to have the biggest museum, but there's a lot of big museums in the world. There's about 100 big museums. And so in 2023, I pulled together the 75 of the world's largest museums to kind of figure out, how do you build the One World Collection? How do you bring the knowledge of all the museums together in advance of digitizing them to make them useful for the next 10 years, 30 years, 50 years? Or maybe till 2150 when you really care about your grandkids' lives? Who knows? And what's interesting is the museums, as you might suspect, are mainly in Europe and North America. That's sort of the footprint of the colonial exercise. Museums are a European-American invention. And by and large, there are not many large museums in the global south. And many of them are places that were former colonies, things. And also, so I sort of looked, the world's largest museum was the first pass, and the second pass was all of the North American museums. North America consists of 26 countries and 24 territories. By my count, there's at least 1,000 natural history museums in North America. So that's what I'm trying to do now, is to pull museums together as a group. And most of them don't see themselves as part of an organization of museums. They're like some museum, there's one here on campus here, but it has brethren elsewhere, and how we pull these things together. And it makes me think about like these bison, how we pulled the bison back from near extinction when my grandfather was 7. And I just did this film about walrus, which aired on the 22nd. And right now there's about 250,000 walrus. There are 3,000-pound animals that live out in the Bering Sea where nobody gets to see them. And I really wanted to show people what walrus are like, because they're super cool, really weird animals that are doing just fine right now. They're weathering a change in the polar sea ice regime. Their landscape is changing, but walrus have been around for 5 million years. There are fossil toothed walruses from San Diego, so we know that walruses can adjust in their temperature tolerances. Maybe there won't be as big a group as them, but I think you can imagine, in my mind, finding the optimistic pathway for everything is where I come from. And so I end with this walrus mom and pup that I photographed out in the Bering Sea last summer, and just leave you with 3 thoughts. 1, museums are cool. I hope you would agree with that thought. 2, science is amazing. I mean, a lot of you do science, and science is how we know and share the information of the planet. The third thing is that nature is wonderful, and we need to really do what we can do to preserve all those things. And that is my talk. Thank you.